They say when your life collapses, it doesn't fall like a building. It folds like paper, one quiet crease at a time until you barely recognize the shape that used to be yours. That's what happened to me. Not an explosion, not a scandalous scene. Just 1,000 quiet decisions, lies disguised as loyalty, and one final signature that turned me into the villain of someone else's story. At 50, I should have been untouchable. 2 decades at Harlow & Crest Consulting, a senior financial analyst trusted with billion-dollar portfolios, a mentor to half the department. My reports were quoted in board meetings. My name opened doors. But power, I learned, is only yours until someone with more charm wants it back. The office overlooked Midtown Manhattan, glass walls catching every sunset like proof of success. That morning, I was reviewing quarterly data when Victor Harlow, our CEO, walked in without knocking. He never knocked. He had the kind of presence that filled every room and left it a little colder. Tailored charcoal suit, smile polished like a diamond sharp enough to cut. "Lavra," he said, leaning against the doorway, "we're adjusting the Q3 client returns. Just optics. A temporary smoothing before the audit." I looked up from my screen. "Optics or manipulation?" He smiled wider. "Perspective. I can't sign off on falsified growth." "You can," he said. "And you will. Everyone else already has." I remember the hum of the air conditioning, the weight of silence. I'd been loyal for 23 years. But loyalty in corporate life is a leash disguised as a medal. Later that day, I confronted my husband, Daniel. He'd once been my compass, steady, thoughtful. Lately, he'd become a stranger with expensive habits. I found a hotel receipt in his coat pocket and a whiff of cologne that wasn't mine. He didn't even pretend to deny it. "Victor invited me to the Bellman Club last month. You know, networking. Things got out of hand." I laughed, hollow. "You're blaming networking for cheating?" He poured himself a drink. "You wouldn't understand. You're married to your job." "I was married to us," I said. "You just stopped showing up." He shrugged, sipping whiskey like it could wash away consequence. I wanted to hate him, but mostly I felt tired of men who mistook destruction for freedom. The scandal hit 3 weeks later. A whistleblower leaked internal memos. The news spread faster than truth ever could. Harlow & Crest accused of portfolio manipulation. The board called an emergency meeting. I walked in carrying evidence that could prove Victor's guilt. He walked in with lawyers and a story. By evening, I was escorted out of the building with a cardboard box and a non-disclosure agreement. The security guard, a kid I'd once helped get an internship, couldn't even look at me. 2 days later, Daniel moved out. "It's better for both of us," he said, already wearing a new watch, probably a gift from Victor. My phone stopped ringing. Colleagues vanished. Recruiters went silent. My reputation, once spotless, now glowed red in every database. I wasn't just unemployed, I was blacklisted. For months, I searched for work, any work. But the industry eats its wounded. No one wanted a 50-year-old analyst accused of fraud, even falsely. My savings evaporated under rent and legal fees. I sold my apartment, my jewelry, the last remnants of a life that no longer fit me. Then came the day I stopped pretending I was still the woman in those tailored suits. I answered a classified ad for housekeeping at a private residence in Westchester. The pay was modest, the hours long, but the work was honest. The owner, a quiet widow named Mrs. Carter, looked me over with kind eyes. "Ever done cleaning before?" she asked. "Not professionally," I said. She smiled gently. "Professionalism is overrated. Dignity isn't." That's how Laura Mitchell disappeared, and Laura Green was born. The first weeks were humbling. My body ached in places I didn't know existed. Polishing floors, scrubbing marble counters, laundering sheets that smelled richer than anything I owned. Yet there was a strange peace in it, the rhythm of routine, the simplicity of finishing a task and knowing it was done right. Every morning, I put on my uniform, tied my hair back, and whispered a small prayer. Not for justice, just for endurance. Sometimes when MRs, Carter's guests arrived, I'd catch fragments of conversation about markets, mergers, the same world I once ruled. Their voices used to sound like home. Now they sounded like ghosts. At night, I'd walk to the small diner down the road for coffee. That's where I met Martha, another housekeeper, gray hair, sharp humor, eyes that had seen every version of hardship. "You've got the hands of someone who used to sign checks, not wash dishes," she said the first time we met. I smiled. "And you've got the intuition of someone who's been around long enough to notice," she laughed. "We all fall, honey. The trick's not staying down." She became my friend, my confidant. We shared stories over pie and cheap coffee. She never asked what I'd been before, and I never offered. Some truths are easier to live without repeating. But at night, alone in my small room above MR's, Carter's garage, I replayed the boardroom scene in my mind, the smug confidence on Victor's face, the betrayal in Daniel's silence, the sound of my career breaking in half. I would wake up drenched in sweat, whispering the same words over and over. "It's over. Let it go." Winter came early that year. I remember one morning when snow covered the estate like a clean sheet, erasing everything beneath it. I stood outside with my broom, breathing clouds into the cold air, and thought, maybe erasure isn't punishment. Maybe it's mercy. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about Victor. News articles called him visionary. Harlow and Crest had rebranded, survived the scandal, and thrived. He gave TED-style talks about resilience while I cleaned bathrooms. The hypocrisy burned, but I learned to swallow it like medicine. Months turned into years. I worked quietly, saved every dollar, and moved between houses when contracts ended. No one recognized me anymore. That anonymity, once terrifying, became protection. Then, one spring evening, Mrs. Carter announced she'd sold her house. "My niece is moving me to Florida," she said. "You'll be fine, Laura. You're a survivor, I can see it." I thanked her and packed my few belongings into an old suitcase. That's how I ended up taking a temporary job through an agency cleaning for private events. The kind where people wear diamonds and talk about stocks between sips of champagne. The kind where I used to belong. My first assignment was a charity gala at a mansion in Greenwich. The client wanted extra staff for post-event cleanup. The house was enormous, white pillars, chandeliers dripping light. As I entered the grand hall, I saw men in tuxedos, women in sequins, the clinking of glasses. I kept my head down and followed the supervisor's instructions. Around midnight, most guests had left. I was wiping wine from a marble counter when a familiar voice sliced through the chatter behind me. "Make sure those figures go to the right accounts, and not another Larva Mitchell situation," the man said, laughing. My hands froze. I turned, heart racing. There he was, Victor Harlow. A little older, a little grayer, still radiating that effortless arrogance. He stood less than 10 feet away, holding court among investors, telling stories about integrity while sipping expensive scotch. For a moment, the room blurred. I felt heat behind my eyes, the kind that precedes tears or violence. Instead, I inhaled deeply and returned to cleaning, cloth trembling in my hand. Victor noticed me. Of course he did. Men like him always notice when power becomes invisible. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing to the counter with mock politeness. "They'll hire anyone these days." His friends chuckled. He didn't recognize me. The woman in the plain uniform wasn't the one who'd once challenged his lies in a boardroom. To him, I was just background. I wiped the counter again, slower this time. Then I looked up, not enough to challenge, just enough to meet his eyes for a second. "Thank you, sir," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. He turned away, already forgetting I existed. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not rage, not revenge. Just certainty, the deep, calm knowledge that I would never break again. I finished the shift in silence. When I left, the night air was sharp with spring chill. I walked to the bus stop beneath a street lamp buzzing faintly and sat down, holding my hands together. They were rough now, calloused, but they were mine. And I whispered to them, almost as if to a child, "We're still here." The bus arrived, half empty. As it pulled away from the mansion, I looked back through the window. The house glowed behind the trees, full of people who believed they'd won. But wealth without conscience is just another kind of poverty. By the time I reached my small apartment in White Plains, the anger had cooled into something cleaner. Resolve, maybe, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. I washed my uniform, hung it neatly, and made tea. The kettle hissed like applause for surviving another day. For the first time in years, I slept without dreams. When morning came, the sun fell across my table, lighting the edges of an unopened letter I'd kept for months. A notice from a law firm I didn't recognize, addressed to Lara Mitchell. I had never opened it, afraid it was another debt collector who'd found my real name. But something in me was tired of hiding. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single page. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, please contact our office regarding the estate of Eliza Grant. It is imperative that we confirm your identity as next of kin. My mother's maiden name." A law firm in Connecticut. I hadn't thought of her in years. She died quietly in 1998, a decade before my world fell apart. She'd owned a small accounting business and raised me alone after my father left. I assumed she left nothing but memories. I folded the letter slowly. Maybe this was nothing. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the first crease folding the paper back open. I didn't know then that within weeks, I'd walk into a bank and find the man who destroyed me sitting across the room. I didn't know that the name I'd buried would rise again, attached to a fortune I never imagined. All I knew that morning was that I wasn't done yet. The days after that gala blurred together like rain streaks on a train window. I kept working, moving from one house to another, from marble floors to dusty basements, from silence to more silence. The world I used to know, meetings, emails, market reports, had been replaced by mop handles, bleach, and the sound of vacuums swallowing crumbs of other people's wealth. But that night in Greenwich stayed with me. Victor's laugh, his casual cruelty, the way he'd looked right through me like I was furniture. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smirk. It wasn't hate that lingered. It was disbelief. Disbelief that someone could ruin your life, forget your face, and still sleep soundly under Egyptian cotton sheets. For a week, I tried to ignore the letter from the law firm. I tucked it into a drawer beside my bus pass and old work ID, relics of two lives that no longer intersected. I told myself I was too busy, too tired, too small for whatever it was. But deep down, I was afraid. Afraid of being seen again, of stepping out from behind the quiet safety of invisibility. Then one morning, Martha found me sitting on the curb outside the staff entrance, staring at nothing. She lit a cigarette, even though we weren't supposed to smoke near the property. "You've got that look again," she said. "What look?" "The one people get before they do something brave or stupid. Usually both." I smiled faintly. "There's a letter in my drawer, from a lawyer. Something about my mother's estate." Martha raised an eyebrow. "And you're sitting here cleaning silverware instead of calling? Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's not." She blew smoke into the air. "You've spent enough years scrubbing floors that don't belong to you. Time to knock on a door that might." That night I read the letter again, slowly, line by line. It wasn't long, but it carried weight, like a whisper that refused to fade. I decided I'd call. The next morning, I used the payphone outside the laundromat. My fingers trembled as I dialed. A calm male voice answered. "Dean and Keller, this is Walter Dean." I hesitated. "Mr. Dean, my name is Lara Mitchell. I received a letter about my mother's estate." Silence, then the sound of papers shuffling. "Ah," he said. "I was hoping you'd call, Miss Mitchell. We've been trying to locate you for months. Why? It's about a trust your mother co-founded in 1983. Real estate holdings, originally modest, but, well, the numbers have grown quite significantly over time. My heart pounded. There must be a mistake. My mother never had that kind of money. Perhaps not when she passed, he said gently. But compound interest and urban development have remarkable patience. If you can come by our office, we'll explain everything. Where? Bridgeport, Connecticut, tomorrow at 10? I agreed before I could talk myself out of it. That night I barely slept. I lay awake listening to the faint hum of the heater and the sound of cars passing outside. Somewhere between exhaustion and disbelief, I thought of my mother, her hands always busy, her eyes always tired, her soft voice saying, "Save what you can." Laura, time makes money grow faster than guilt. The next morning, I put on my cleanest clothes, a plain beige blouse and slacks. They didn't fit quite right, but they were the closest thing I had to armor. I took the early bus north, watching the city shrink into smaller towns, smaller ambitions, and bigger skies. The law office was in an old brick building with ivy climbing the sides. Inside, it smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish. Walter Dean was waiting in the lobby, tall, gray-haired, dressed like the kind of man who still believed in handshakes and fountain pens. "Ms. Mitchell," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." We sat in his office surrounded by leather-bound files and family photos. He opened a folder labeled Grant Real Estate Trust. "Your mother, Eliza, co-founded this with her business partner in 1983, he explained. At the time, they purchased several distressed properties in the New England area. The portfolio was modest, worth about $70,000. But she never sold her shares, and the holdings were managed conservatively. Over 40 years, the trust's value grew. Exponentially, I swallowed. How exponentially? He pushed a document toward me. The number stared up like something obscene. $175,412,000. For a moment, I thought I misread it. My breath caught. There must be a decimal error. No, Miss Mitchell, it's accurate. You're the sole beneficiary. I leaned back, dizzy. 50 years old, living in a rented room above a garage, and suddenly told I was worth more money than everyone who had ever looked down on me combined. Walter continued gently. The assets have been held in escrow. The only condition was proof of identity, which your documentation satisfies. I'd recommend meeting with the bank to set up transfer arrangements. I don't understand. Why didn't anyone tell me sooner? He smiled sadly. We tried. You changed your name, disappeared from every record. Sometimes life hides us better than we intend. I stared at the papers, the ink blurring through tears. My mother had always been practical, never rich. She'd left me recipes and caution, not wealth, but apparently, she'd also left me a miracle. Walter cleared his throat. Would you like me to accompany you to the bank? They'll need confirmation. I nodded, still numb. We drove to the Bridgeport National Bank, a tall building of glass and steel that seemed to hum with money. I followed Walter inside, each step surreal. The lobby gleamed, all marble and whispers. A young receptionist led us to a private office. Inside sat Emily Parker, the branch manager, mid-30s, kind eyes behind dark frames. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Dean, she said. Please have a seat. She reviewed the documents, nodded, and smiled. Everything appears in order. Congratulations, Miss Mitchell. The word congratulations felt strange, like it belonged to someone else. And then, as if the universe wanted to add irony to theater, the door opened, and in walked Victor Harlow. I froze. He was older but unmistakable. The same polished confidence, the same tailored arrogance. He carried a leather portfolio and spoke to Emily without even glancing at me. Emily, I need to discuss the transfer for Harlow Holdings, he said. Of course, Mr. Harlow, she replied. We'll finish Miss Missiel's paperwork first. It took him a second to process the name. Then he turned, slowly, like someone hearing a ghost. Our eyes met. His face drained of color. Lavra. Mitchell? I didn't move. I didn't speak. I simply looked at him. The man who'd taken everything, now watching me reclaim it without saying a word. Walter glanced between us, oblivious to the history. Harlow, he said politely. We're nearly done, Victor stammered, trying to compose himself. I thought they said you were gone? I finished for him. Forgotten? He swallowed. Lavra, it wasn't personal. I smiled, small and quiet. Of course not. People like you never make it personal. You just destroy lives from a comfortable distance. Emily looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. The air in the room thickened with the kind of silence that demands witness. Walter handed me a pen. If you'll sign here, Miss Mitchell, the transfer will be finalized. I took it, my hand steady. I signed my name, my real name, for the first time in years. The ink glided smooth, confident, final. Victor's voice trembled. What is this? An inheritance, I said. My mother built something honest. Time did the rest. He blinked, trying to find footing. You're wealthy? I was always wealthy, I said softly. I just didn't have money before. His jaw tightened. Are you going to ruin you? I finished. No, you already did that to yourself. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Lavra, listen. We could. I raised a hand. Don't. Whatever you think you're offering, I'm not buying. Walter gathered the documents, unaware he was packing up 20 years of poetic justice. That's all for today, Miss Mitchell, he said kindly. The funds will clear within 72 hours. I stood, smoothing my blouse. Thank you, Mr. Dean, Miss Parker. As I walked past Victor, he reached out as if to stop me. Lavra, I turned once more. You know what the cruelest thing about losing everything is, Victor? It's realizing you didn't lose much at all, just illusions. Then I left. Outside, the sky was overcast, a pale silver that made the world feel suspended. I stood on the steps of the bank, breathing the air like it was something new. My hands shook, not from anger, but from awe. I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. The tears had run out years ago. What filled me instead was silence, clean, vast, and merciful. Walter offered to drive me home, but I declined. I wanted to walk. I needed to feel the ground beneath me, solid and real. Every step back toward the bus stop felt like reclaiming a fragment of myself. The woman who'd once begged for justice didn't need it anymore. Justice had arrived quietly, disguised as coincidence. That night, I took the bus back to White Plains. I sat by the window, watching town slip by, headlights streaking through fog. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. When I reached my apartment, I hung up my uniform. I folded it neatly and placed it in a box. Tomorrow, I would start again. But before I went to bed, I wrote a letter, not to Victor, not to Daniel, not to anyone living. It was to my mother. You were right, Mom. Time really does make money grow faster than guilt. But more than that, it makes character grow too. Thank you for saving me, even after you were gone. I placed the letter on my windowsill, beside the last cup of tea I made before sleeping. The city was quiet, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt like I could rest. Because somehow, without planning it, I had finally become whole again. The smell of old paper and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. I remember it so clearly. That branch of the bank always had a calming quietness to it, clean, organized, almost reverent. It was a place I came once a week to deposit my modest earnings, to pay rent through cashier's checks, to stare at the same patterned tile floor while pretending I didn't notice people looking at my faded shoes. That morning, I was already feeling out of place. My uniform still had bleach stains I hadn't managed to scrub out. The sun caught the silver in my hair, exposing more than I liked. I had come only to cash a $192 check from my last cleaning job. But as I approached the counter, something strange happened. Miss, Collins? The young teller said hesitantly, using the name I'd used since I disappeared. Could you wait just a moment? The branch manager would like to speak with you. Every muscle in my body tensed. I thought it was a mistake. A bounced check. Maybe they flagged my ID. My stomach dropped. That name, Lavra Collins, was borrowed, temporary, a ghost's name. I never imagined it could somehow tether me back to my past. Right this way, please, she said gently, leading me to a corner office I had never been invited into before. The moment the door opened, I froze. Sitting inside was a tall, lean man in a beige suit, spectacles on the bridge of his nose, and a leather briefcase at his feet. He stood as I entered, holding a folder in his hand, his demeanor calm and composed like someone used to delivering news, both good and bad. Miss Mitchell, he said. He used my real name. My knees weakened. My throat tightened. The name felt like thunder in a quiet canyon. No one had called me that in years. I stammered. You've got the wrong person. I don't think so, he said, opening the folder. Lavra Eleanor Mitchell, born October 11th, 1972, daughter of Eleanor Zhang Carter, formerly employed at Wentworth Consulting. You've been using the name Lavra Collins for approximately 7 years. My fingers trembled. Who are you? He smiled, just slightly. My name is Walter Dean. I'm an estate attorney. I worked closely with your late mother, Eleanor Carter. I couldn't breathe. My mother, we hadn't spoken in almost a decade, not since the trial. She had tried to contact me through letters, through my sister. I never opened any of them. I had been too ashamed, too wounded, too buried in grief and rage to hear her voice again. And now she was gone? Walter nodded softly, as if reading my thoughts. She passed almost 2 years ago, quietly, peacefully, but what she left behind wasn't small. He slid the folder toward me. Inside were documents, trust fund statements, property deeds, dividends, numbers I couldn't process. I stared at them like they were written in another language. This, he said, tapping one page, is your inheritance. From the Carter Mitchell Real Estate Trust, originally established in 1987, your mother never touched a penny of it. She insisted it grow, untouched, until you were ready. The trust is now matured. With all accrued assets and compounded growth, the current valuation sits at, stop, I whispered. I don't need the number, he paused. I wasn't ready. Not yet, but then the door opened behind him. And the universe, in all its dark humor, decided that this was the moment. Victor Harlow walked in. Tall, confident, Armani-clad. He didn't see me at first. He was in mid-conversation with the bank director, laughing, shaking hands, radiating power. My blood froze. Victor, the man who destroyed me. The man who lied, manipulated, corrupted. The man who framed me and walked away clean. The man who didn't recognize me when I scrubbed floors in the mansion where he drank his champagne. The man who had no idea that the maid he humiliated was the same woman who once reviewed global portfolios for clients with 9-figure accounts. His laughter died as his eyes met mine. He blinked, once, twice, his brow furrowed. Recognition bloomed in slow, dawning horror. Lavra, he said, his voice uncertain. Walter turned toward me. Is there a problem? I stood slowly. The papers in my hand shook, but not from fear, from clarity, from power, from the thunderstorm rising inside me that had waited 7 long years to roar. Victor's lips parted. My God, I thought you vanished, I said, voice steady. I did. You're a maid? I smiled, but it wasn't kind. I was cleaning your mess long before I wore a uniform, I said. The bank fell into silence. Walter, visibly confused, looked between us. Victor's color drained. The director fumbled for a reason to leave the room. And me? I never broke eye contact. Walter cleared his throat, oblivious to the history crackling between us. As I was saying, Miss Mitchell, you are now, after taxes and final disbursements, the sole heir to approximately $175 million. The words echoed. Victor staggered slightly. His hand gripped the back of a chair. I looked at him then, not with hate, not even with pity, just peace. You told the world I wasn't worth trusting, I said. Now I have the means to prove you wrong. Without saying a word, he opened his mouth, closed it again. For once, Victor Harlow had nothing to say. I turned to Walter. Thank you for delivering this in person. He nodded. There's more to discuss, of course. Property transfers, legal name restoration, press confidentiality. I'll handle it, I said. All of it, quietly. Victor watched me walk out. No applause. No revenge speech. No public reckoning. Just silence. I stepped outside into the sunlight, heart pounding, lungs full of air I hadn't truly breathed in years. And that was the moment I understood something no courtroom or press headline could teach me. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it walks away. Dignified, whole, and finally free. I didn't go on a spending spree. I didn't buy a mansion, or a yacht, or fly first class to Paris like the old me once joked about in staff meetings. No, I did something quieter, something more powerful. I healed. In the weeks that followed the bank meeting, the city moved around me as if nothing had changed. The sidewalks were still cracked. The same pigeons still fought over crumbs on 5th and Main. But I had changed. Internally, irrevocably. The first thing I did was buy new shoes. Not because I wanted something flashy, but because I deserved to walk without pain. My old pair had been worn down to the lining, soaked through too many winters. When the clerk at the modest store bent down to help me, I nearly cried. No one had looked at me that way in years, like I mattered. I checked into a small hotel with clean sheets and a locking door. I slept for 12 hours straight. Then I made a list. Not of people to get revenge on. Not of places to flaunt my wealth. But of lives I had touched and those who had touched mine when I had nothing. At the top of that list was M.R.'s, Jennings, the elderly woman who lived in the apartment below mine, who once brought me soup when I had the flu and didn't ask questions. I paid off her rent for the next 10 years and had a ramp installed outside her building so she could use her walker without help. Then I visited Ms. Aranda, the single mother who shared cleaning gigs with me on Saturdays. I told her I was leaving the company and offered to buy her a small car so she wouldn't have to take 2 buses with her son anymore. She cried for 10 minutes straight. And then I returned to the building where it all began. The mansion, Victor's mansion, not to confront him again. That part of my life was over. But because there was a girl named Daisy who cleaned toilets there and once gave me her sandwich when I hadn't eaten all day. She didn't know my name. She just saw someone hungry. I found her during a lunch break, still in uniform, still unnoticed by the marble floors and crystal chandeliers around her. She looked up in shock when I said her name. Daisy, I smiled. You once saved me without knowing it. She blinked, confused. I handed her a card. On it was a scholarship offer, already paid in full, to any nursing program of her choice. Someone once told me I was worth more than I believed, I said. Now it's your turn. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Weeks turned into months. My face started to return to the mirror. Not the gaunt, sunken version, but the real one, with light, with breath. I moved to a quiet town by the coast. No paparazzi. No news reports. Walter handled everything silently, just as I asked. We structured the trust under a private foundation, the EJM Initiative, in honor of my mother, Eleanor Jane Mitchell. It focused on women over 40 re-entering the workforce after hardship. Women who were forgotten, invisible, broken down, just like I had been. One afternoon, I received a letter, handwritten, sloppy cursive, no return address. It was from my mother. Walter had found it among her personal belongings, tucked between Bible pages. She had written it just weeks before her passing. My dearest Lovra, I know you may never read this. I know I broke your heart when I doubted you, when I believed what the press and that vile man said. I've carried that shame every day, but I also never stopped believing in your spirit. I knew if you were alive and free, you would rebuild yourself. That's why I never touched the trust. That's why I let the world think you were gone. Because I knew one day you'd rise again, and the world would need you. I love you more than words. I always have. Mom, I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed like a child. 1 year later, I stood on a small stage inside a women's shelter we had partnered with. There were 20 women in the room, most older. Some scared, all broken in some way. I didn't give them a speech about wealth. I told them the truth. That I had once been them. That I had eaten canned beans for weeks. That I had scrubbed vomit from marble floors while men in tuxedos stepped over me. That I had been lied about, blacklisted, abandoned by everyone who once praised me. And that one woman's belief in me, my mother's, had silently waited in the dark until I was ready to believe in myself again. The room fell silent, and then came a single clap, then another, until all 20 stood and applauded, not for me, but for themselves, because they saw their own reflection in my story. I never made the news again. Victor Harlow quietly retired 6 months later. His new fund collapsed during a legal audit. I wasn't involved. Life handled him better than I ever could. I kept the house by the sea. I still drove a modest car. I still liked doing my own laundry, even when I didn't have to. Sometimes when the waves were low and the sun set just right, I'd walk barefoot on the beach and whisper into the wind, I'm still here. And I'm not invisible anymore, because dignity isn't about being seen. It's about seeing yourself and loving what you find, even after everything.